I remember the exact moment I understood what I was worth to them. Nothing. It was a Tuesday morning in October, the kind of crisp autumn day that makes you feel like possibilities exist. I walked into Whitmore and Associates with my head high, carrying 3 years of perfect performance reviews, 2 major client acquisitions, and the naive belief that excellence would be my shield. My name is James Carter. I'm 31 years old, and I've been a senior financial analyst at this firm since I was 28. I graduated top of my class from Howard University, earned my MBA from Wharton, and passed the CFA exam on my first attempt. I say this not to boast, but because you need to understand what they chose to ignore. The conference room on the 14th floor has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. That morning, the room was filled with the usual faces, 12 white men and women in expensive suits, and me, the only black face in a sea of privilege that had never once questioned its own existence. "Before we begin the quarterly review," said Richard Whitmore III, the firm's managing partner, "we need to address a serious matter." I noticed how his eyes landed on me. Not a glance, a target lock. "We've discovered some irregularities in the Patterson account." My stomach tightened. The Patterson account was my biggest client, a $40 million portfolio I'd grown by 18% in 2 years. It was my crown jewel, the proof that I belonged here. "What kind of irregularities?" asked Sandra Mitchell, the head of compliance. Her voice was neutral, but I caught her looking at me too. "Unauthorized transactions, money moving to offshore accounts." Richard's voice carried the weight of an executioner reading charges. "James, would you like to explain?" 12 pairs of eyes, 12 judges, 0 presumption of innocence. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. "Every transaction I've made on that account is documented and approved. I can pull the records right now." "That won't be necessary." Richard held up a folder. "We already have the evidence. Transfers totaling $2.3 million over the past 6 months, all traced back to your workstation." "That's impossible." "Is it?" This came from Bradley Morrison, the firm's golden boy. He was 33, had been at the firm for 2 years less than me, and had already been promoted to associate partner. His father played golf with Richard. His grandfather had been one of the firm's founders. Bradley leaned back in his chair with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You people always say that." "You people." The words hung in the air like smoke from a burning cross. Nobody flinched. Nobody corrected him. The silence was its own kind of violence. "Bradley," I said slowly, "what exactly do you mean by you people?" He shrugged, still smiling. "People who get caught." "What did you think I meant?" I thought about every time Bradley had interrupted me in meetings, every time he'd repeated my ideas 5 minutes later and received praise for them, every time he'd jokingly asked if I played basketball or listened to rap music, every time he'd mispronounced my name despite knowing me for 3 years. "James," Richard continued, "given the severity of these allegations, we're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. You're not even going to investigate. You're not going to let me defend myself. The evidence is clear. Evidence can be fabricated." Richard's face hardened. "Are you suggesting someone at this firm committed a crime to frame you? That's a serious accusation. And accusing me of embezzling $2.3 million isn't? We have documentation. Let me see it." "That's not possible at this time. It's part of an ongoing investigation." I looked around the room, searching for an ally, a friendly face, anyone who might speak up. My eyes met those of Patricia Newman, a senior analyst who had mentored me during my first year. We'd had lunch together dozens of times. I'd helped her son with his college applications. She looked away. "This is wrong," I said. "And you all know it." "What I know," Richard said, is that we trusted you with our clients' money, and you betrayed that trust. Frankly, we should have been more careful. Your background should have been a red flag. My background? You mean Howard University and Wharton, my CFA certification, my 3 years of impeccable performance? I mean your background. He let the word hang there. Loaded with meaning, he was too much of a coward to say directly. 2 security guards appeared at the door, both white, both looking at me like I was a shoplifter they'd caught with stolen merchandise. "Mr. Carter, please come with us." I stood up slowly, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. As I walked toward the door, Bradley called out, "Hey, James, maybe try the post office. I hear they're always hiring." Someone laughed. I didn't turn around to see who. The walk to my office felt like a funeral procession. People I'd worked with for 3 years suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Nobody said goodbye, nobody asked what happened, nobody offered support. I had 15 minutes to pack up 3 years of my life. The security guards watched my every move, as if they expected me to steal a stapler on my way out. On my desk was a photo of my mother. She'd worked 2 jobs for 20 years to put me through school. She'd believed that education was the great equalizer, that if I just worked hard enough, proved myself smart enough, achieved enough, the color of my skin would become invisible. She was wrong. They let me keep the photo. How generous. The elevator ride down was eternal. I shared it with Margaret Chen from HR, who clutched her purse a little tighter when I got on. 14 floors of silence, broken only by my own heartbeat. When I stepped out of the building, the October air hit me like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk, cardboard box in my arms, watching people in suits walk past without seeing me. I'd become invisible. Just another black man who'd been shown his place. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't give them anything. But inside, something was crystallizing, something cold and sharp and patient. I took the train back to my apartment in Hyde Park. The rattling of the L car was almost soothing, a rhythm I could lose myself in. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, tired eyes, clenched jaw, hands that wouldn't stop trembling. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "How was your day, baby? So proud of you." I couldn't answer. Not yet. At home, I sat in the dark for hours, replaying every moment. The accusation, the folder Richard held like a weapon. Bradley's smile, Patricia's averted eyes, the security guards, the elevator, the sidewalk. Something wasn't right. Not just morally, logically. I'd been set up. That much was obvious. But why? And by whom? The Patterson account was profitable. My work was impeccable. I had no enemies at the firm that I knew of. Unless you counted the quiet resentment that followed me through every room I entered. And then it hit me. The promotion. 3 weeks ago, Richard had announced that the firm would be creating a new position, Director of Client Relations. It was a stepping stone to partnership, a recognition of excellence. A seat at the table that had always been reserved for people who didn't look like me. I had been the front-runner. My numbers were better than anyone else's. My client satisfaction ratings were the highest in the firm. Even Richard had admitted, in a rare moment of something resembling fairness, that I was a strong candidate. But Bradley wanted that position. Bradley, whose numbers were mediocre at best. Bradley, whose clients tolerated him because of his family name. Bradley, who had never earned anything in his life that wasn't handed to him. I grabbed my laptop and started making a list. Every interaction with Bradley, every meeting, every joke, every comment. I wrote down dates, times, witnesses. I documented everything I could remember. If they wanted to destroy me, fine. But I wasn't going down without understanding exactly how they'd done it. The next morning, I called my attorney. Marcus Thompson was a Harvard law graduate who specialized in employment discrimination. He was also my fraternity brother from Howard, one of the few people in the world I trusted completely. "They did what?" His voice was sharp with anger. "James, this is textbook. Accusation without evidence, immediate termination, racial undertones. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen." "I don't want a lawsuit." "Not yet. What do you want?" I paused, watching the sunlight move across my apartment floor. What did I want? Justice, revenge, to burn the whole rotten system to the ground. "I want the truth," I said finally. "I want to know exactly who did this to me and exactly how. And then I want to make sure they can never do it to anyone else." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's going to take time and resources and a lot of patience. I have nothing but time now." "James, are you sure about this? We could file a wrongful termination suit tomorrow. They'd probably settle out of court just to avoid the bad publicity." "And then what? Bradley gets a slap on the wrist. Richard makes a statement about diversity initiatives, and 6 months later they do the same thing to some other black analyst who dared to be excellent. You want to change the system. I want to expose it. There's a difference." Marcus sighed. "All right. First step, we need to get those documents they claim to have. If you were framed, there's got to be evidence of that too. How do we get them? Leave that to me. I've got some contacts at the SEC. If there really was $2.3 million moved to offshore accounts, there's a paper trail, and paper trails don't lie." After we hung up, I sat with my cold coffee and my racing thoughts. The apartment felt different now, smaller, quieter, like a cell I'd chosen for myself. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "James, I know what they did. Call me. We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time before I responded. "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then someone who's been where you are, someone who kept records. My heart was pounding. A trap? A test? Or something else? "Where do you want to meet?" "Harold's Chicken, 87th Street. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone." I put the phone down and looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in those glass towers, people were making decisions about my life, people who didn't see me as human, people who thought they could destroy me without consequences. They were about to learn otherwise. Harold's Chicken on 87th Street was a South Side institution. Bulletproof glass at the counter, grease-stained menus, and the best fried chicken in the city. It was also the last place anyone from Whitmore and Associates would ever set foot, which is probably why she chose it. I spotted her immediately. Angela Washington was a petite woman in her mid-40s, with natural hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was wearing a University of Chicago sweatshirt and reading a paperback novel, looking nothing like the corporate analyst she used to be. "You came," she said as I sat down across from her. "You knew I would." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it, just recognition. "They got you too, didn't they? The Whitmore special." "What do you know?" Angela closed her book, Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, and leaned forward. "I know because they did the same thing to me 8 years ago, accused me of leaking client information to a competitor, had evidence I'd never seen, escorted me out within an hour of the accusation. Did you fight it?" "I tried, hired a lawyer, filed a wrongful termination suit." She shook her head. "They settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement, took the money because I had 2 kids and no other options. Hated myself for it every day since." "But you kept records." "I kept everything. Call it paranoia. Call it survival instinct. But when you're black in a white firm, you learn pretty quick that your memory won't be enough. You need paper." She pulled a flash drive from her pocket and slid it across the table. "What's on this?" "Emails, memos, meeting notes. 8 years of watching them do to others what they did to me." She paused. "And evidence that Bradley Morrison has been skimming from client accounts for at least 3 years. My hands were shaking as I picked up the drive. "Why didn't you use this yourself?" Because I was scared, because I had kids to feed, because I thought nobody would believe a black woman over the Whitmore dynasty. Angela's eyes met mine. But mostly because I was alone. You won't be. What do you mean? You're not the first, James, and you won't be the last. But you might be the one who ends it. She stood up, gathering her things. There are others, people who were pushed out, silenced, paid off, people who have pieces of the puzzle. I can connect you with them, if you're willing to do what I couldn't. I'm willing. She studied me for a long moment. Good, because what you're about to do is going to be dangerous, exhausting, and possibly career-ending. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the conference room. Bradley's smile, Richard's cold eyes, the security guards, the elevator, the sidewalk. They already ended my career. Now I'm going to end theirs. Over the next 6 weeks, I became a ghost. I didn't look for another job. I didn't socialize. I barely slept. Every waking moment was devoted to one thing, building a case so airtight that not even the Whitmore money could make it disappear. Angela was true to her word. She connected me with 7 other former employees, all people of color, all accused of some version of professional misconduct, all forced out without due process. Their stories were heartbreakingly similar. Stellar performance, false accusation, immediate termination, settlement with NDA. But each of them had kept something. A screenshot here, a saved email there, a recording of a meeting made on a personal phone. Fragments of a pattern that, when assembled, painted a devastating picture. The pattern was this: whenever a person of color at Whitmore and Associates got too close to partnership, too successful, too visible, they were eliminated. The accusations varied: financial misconduct, sexual harassment, intellectual property theft, but the playbook was always the same. Make the accusation in front of witnesses, refuse to share the evidence, offer a settlement in exchange for silence, move on. And at the center of it all, like a spider in a silk web, was Bradley Morrison. Bradley, whose mediocre performance was consistently overlooked. Bradley, who had been promoted 3 times in 5 years, despite lackluster numbers. Bradley, who had a special arrangement with the firm's IT department that allowed him to access any workstation on the network. I spent nights in my apartment with Marcus, building our case. The flash drive Angela gave me was a goldmine. But we needed more. We needed to prove not just that Bradley had framed me, but that the firm itself was complicit in a decades-long pattern of discrimination. You realize what you're alleging, Marcus said one night, rubbing his tired eyes. This isn't just wrongful termination, this is racketeering. Civil rights violations, securities fraud. I know. If we're wrong about any of this, they'll destroy you. Countersuits, defamation claims, the works. We're not wrong. Marcus looked at the wall of evidence we'd assembled. Printouts, timelines, organizational charts, financial records. No, he said slowly. We're not. The breakthrough came in week 5. One of Angela's contacts, a former IT technician named David Park, had kept server logs from his time at the firm. He'd been fired for budget cuts a year after he noticed suspicious access patterns on the network. Late-night logins from Bradley's credentials to workstations belonging to employees who were later terminated. He was careful, David explained over a video call. Used his own access to plant evidence, then triggered anonymous reports to compliance. Same playbook every time. Can you prove he accessed my workstation? David smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. I already have. October 3rd, 2:47 a.m. Bradley Morrison logged into your machine using admin privileges, stayed on for 47 minutes, long enough to fabricate $2.3 million in fake transfers. I felt something unlock in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but possibility. Will you testify to this? In a heartbeat. They fired me because I knew too much. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to ask. The pieces were coming together, but we still needed one crucial element, an insider. Someone currently at the firm who could confirm our findings and provide access to evidence we couldn't get ourselves. I found her in the last place I expected. Patricia Newman, the mentor who'd looked away when I was accused, who'd said nothing while my career was dismantled, reached out to me through a mutual friend. She wanted to meet. We sat in the back corner of a coffee shop in Evanston, far from any eyes that might recognize us. Patricia looked older than I remembered, worn down by something I couldn't name. "I should have said something," she began. "In that meeting, when they accused you." "Yes, you should have." She flinched but didn't look away. "I was scared. I'm 52 years old, James. I've got a mortgage and a kid in college and no guarantee anyone else would hire me. I've watched what they do to people who speak up, and yet you're here. Because what they did to you was the last straw." Patricia's voice hardened. "Bradley came to me last week, asked if I'd noticed any irregularities in the Thompson account, asked leading questions, suggested that maybe I should report my concerns to compliance." The Thompson account. Marcus Thompson. He's the next target, James. A black attorney at a major Chicago firm who's been making too much noise about discrimination cases. They're going to use the same playbook. Plant evidence, make an accusation, destroy his career before he can fight back. My blood ran cold. Marcus wasn't just my attorney, he was my friend. He was the only reason I had any hope of winning this fight. "How do you know this?" "Because I've seen the emails. Bradley's getting sloppy. He accidentally CC'd me on a thread with Richard about preemptive measures against hostile legal actors. They mentioned Marcus by name. Can you get me those emails?" Patricia hesitated. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. "Already printed. I also made copies of Bradley's calendar, his expense reports, and his client communications for the past 6 months. She pushed them across the table. "I'm done being silent, James. Whatever you need, I'm in." I looked at the woman who'd abandoned me in my moment of need. Part of me wanted to hate her. Part of me understood. "Thank you, Patricia. Don't thank me. Just bring them down." The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Marcus worked around the clock with a team of associates, building a federal case that would target not just Bradley, but the entire leadership of Whitmore and Associates. We had evidence of fraud, discrimination, securities violations, and civil rights abuses spanning 2 decades. But the timing had to be perfect. Whitmore and Associates had their annual shareholder meeting scheduled for December 15th. It was the biggest event of their year, attended by major investors, media and industry leaders. It was also the event where they would announce the new Director of Client Relations, a position that had been formally awarded to Bradley Morrison. We planned our move for that day. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked the night before. "Once we file, there's no going back. There's no. They'll come after you with everything they have." I thought about my mother, who'd worked her whole life believing the system could be fair. I thought about Angela, who'd taken their money and their silence because she had no other choice. I thought about the dozens of careers they'd destroyed, the lives they'd derailed, the dreams they'd crushed. I'm sure. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every detail, every contingency, every possible way this could go wrong. But underneath the anxiety was something else, something that felt almost like peace. For the first time since that October morning, I knew exactly who I was and exactly what I had to do. Tomorrow the masks would come off. Tomorrow they would learn that silence is not the same as surrender. Tomorrow the reckoning would begin. The Whitmore and Associates shareholder meeting was held at the Ritz-Carlton, Chicago, in a ballroom that cost more per hour than most people make in a month. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, the smell of money and entitlement thick in the air. I arrived at 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the main presentation was scheduled to begin. I was wearing the same suit I'd worn to my termination meeting. Charcoal grey, white shirt, burgundy tie. It felt right. Symbolic. Security stopped me at the door. "I'm sorry, sir, this is a private event." I smiled and handed him an envelope. "I'm here as a representative of the SEC. These are my credentials. I believe you'll want to let me in." The guard's face went pale. He fumbled with his radio, called someone, waited. 2 minutes later, I was escorted to a seat in the back of the ballroom. Richard Whitmore III was at the podium, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. Behind him, projected on a massive screen, were the firm's quarterly numbers, carefully curated to hide decades of fraud. "And now," Richard was saying, "I'm pleased to announce a promotion that represents the future of our firm. Please welcome our new Director of Client Relations, Bradley Morrison." Applause rippled through the room as Bradley took the stage. He was beaming, basking in the validation he'd stolen from everyone who'd come before him. He shook Richard's hand, posed for photos, waved to the crowd like a politician who'd just won an election. I waited. Bradley began his acceptance speech, full of buzzwords and empty gratitude. He thanked his mentors, his colleagues, his family legacy. He talked about innovation and client relationships and building bridges. He was 4 minutes into his speech when the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. 12 federal agents walked in, led by a woman in a dark suit who moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. Behind them came Marcus and his legal team, carrying boxes of documents. The room fell silent. "Bradley Morrison," the lead agent announced, her voice cutting through the confusion. "You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations. You have the right to remain an attorney. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." For a moment, Bradley didn't move. His face cycled through emotions, confusion, disbelief, anger, fear, before settling on something that looked almost like recognition. He knew. The agents moved forward, handcuffs glinting in the chandelier light. Bradley's eyes found me in the crowd, and for a single crystalline moment, we saw each other clearly. "You," he said, "this was you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The room erupted into chaos as the agents escorted Bradley away. Shareholders were shouting, demanding explanations. Richard Whitmore stood frozen at the podium, his face grey, watching his empire crumble in real time. But we weren't done. Marcus stepped forward, handing a document to the lead agent. "We have additional arrest warrants for Richard Whitmore III, Sandra Mitchell, and 4 other senior partners. The charges include conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and systematic discrimination in violation of federal civil rights laws." More agents appeared, more handcuffs, more faces I'd seen in that conference room. The faces that had judged me guilty without evidence, that had watched my career destroyed and said nothing. One by one, they were led away. I stayed in my seat, watching. The shareholders who'd funded this corrupt enterprise were scrambling, making calls, trying to distance themselves from the disaster. Media had arrived, someone had tipped them off, and cameras were capturing every moment. Patricia Newman found me in the chaos. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "We did it," she said. "You did it. If you hadn't come forward, if you hadn't fought back, I'd still be silent." She squeezed my hand. "Thank you, James, for being braver than I was." The next few hours were a blur of interviews, statements, and paperwork, but by the time the sun set over Chicago, the story was everywhere. The headline in the Tribune, "Financial Giant Exposed. Decades of Fraud and Discrimination at Whitmore and Associates." The lead story on the evening news, 12 arrested in sweeping federal investigation of Chicago investment firm. The tweet that went viral, Black analyst wrongly accused of embezzlement exposes massive corporate conspiracy. James Carter is my new hero. That night, I sat alone in my apartment watching the coverage on my laptop. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, victorious, and part of me did, but mostly I felt tired. I called my mother. She'd been watching the news, crying and laughing at the same time. "Baby," she said, "I always knew you were special, but this, I never imagined." "I did it for you, Mama, for everyone who ever told you that working hard would be enough. I wanted to prove that sometimes it is, but only if you're willing to fight. I'm so proud of you. I know. I love you." After we hung up, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window. The Chicago skyline glittered in the darkness, indifferent to the human drama playing out below. In those towers, people were still making decisions about other people's lives. The system hadn't changed overnight. It probably never would. But something had shifted. The settlement came 3 weeks later. Whitmore and Associates Board, desperate to avoid a prolonged public trial, offered a figure that made Marcus whistle. "You could retire tomorrow," he said. "I don't want to retire. I want to work." "Work? Where?" I smiled. "I've been thinking about starting a firm. One where people who look like me actually have a seat at the table, where excellence is rewarded regardless of background, where the bullshit stops at the door." Marcus laughed. "You're going to need a lawyer." I was hoping you'd say that. We shook hands, and just like that, Carter and Thompson Financial was born. The trial of Richard Whitmore, Bradley Morrison, and their co-conspirators lasted 8 months. I testified for 2 days, calmly recounting every detail of my experience. Bradley's lawyers tried to discredit me, suggested I was bitter, vengeful, unreliable, but the evidence spoke for itself. Guilty on all counts. Bradley got 15 years. Richard got 12. The others received varying sentences, but none walked free. More importantly, the victims, Angela, David, Patricia, and dozens of others who'd come forward once they saw it was finally safe, received settlements and public acknowledgement of what had been done to them. Angela used her settlement to start a non-profit supporting black professionals in corporate environments. David went back to school for cybersecurity law. Patricia became an advocate for whistleblower protections. And me, I built my firm. 5 years later, Carter and Thompson is one of the most successful minority-owned investment companies in the Midwest. We manage over $500 million in assets. We've never once made an accusation without evidence, never once fired someone without due process. Never once let someone's skin color determine their worth. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that October morning, the conference room, the accusation, Bradley's smile, the walk to my office, the cardboard box, the sidewalk. I think about who I was before that moment and who I became after. They thought they were destroying me. In reality, they were forging me into something stronger, sharper, more dangerous than they could have imagined. They taught me that the system will never protect people who look like me. We have to protect ourselves. So that's what I do now. I protect people. I build things. I make space at tables where space has never been offered. I don't hate Richard Whitmore or Bradley Morrison. Hate is a luxury I can't afford. But I also don't forgive them. Forgiveness is earned, and some debts are too great to ever repay. What I feel mostly is clarity. This is what it means to be a black man in America. You work twice as hard, achieve twice as much, and still they try to take it from you. The question is never whether they'll come for you, only when and whether you'll be ready. I was ready. Last week I gave a commencement speech at Howard University, my alma mater. I told those young black graduates about my experience, about what I learned, about what I hope for them. I told them the system is rigged, but that doesn't mean we can't win. It means we have to be smarter, more strategic, more patient than those who want to see us fail. It means we have to document everything, trust our instincts, and never let them see us sweat. And I told them the most important thing of all. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is preparation. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who's been building a case for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They tried to humiliate me. They tried to destroy me. They tried to make an example of me, but I made an example of them instead. And every time a young black professional reads about what happened, every time they realize that it's possible to fight back and win, every time they find the courage to document, to prepare, to refuse to accept injustice as inevitable, that's my real victory. Not the money, not the firm, not the headlines, the knowledge that I made it harder for them to do to others what they did to me. That's enough. That's everything.